Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Hope everyone's staying safe and staying healthy. Terribly excited today. We're really lucky to have Brendan and Sandy from RiskStream Collaborative joining us, and we're going to talk through the Mortality Monitor proof of concept application that was developed in tandem with Riskstream and Kaleido. So really cool application. Uses a large array of the functionality inside of Kaleido. Really a great encapsulation of what we mean when we say, a full stack enterprise grade application. So we'll walk you through all of the nuances of, why we did this, what Riskstream is, what the current initiatives are, and then I'll take you through sort of architecture and backend. Quick agenda here, very broad strokes, back of the napkin sort of stuff. Brendan, Head of Outreach at Riskstream, and of course, Brendan and Sandy can introduce themselves. He's just going to talk you through Riskstream, talk about some of the missions and the initiatives that they're working through. Sandy's going to peel the onion back a bit more on Mortality Monitor, explain why they did it, what the current pain points and frictions were, and sort of the state of play with decedent profiles. And then myself, Nick, Head of Customer Success at Kaleido, I'll take you through the architecture of the application. I'll show you the application, and then I'll show you the magical pieces that we have in the back end on Kaleido. I'm going to skip the vast majority of the slides today, but one thing I will point out, and we always show these slides on the Tech Tuesdays and other webinars, but blockchain is incredibly important. That's our ledger, that's our trust anchor, it's our indelible source of truth. But there are a ton of other features you need when you build an application. You need answers around data, around storage, the way that you can integrate with your back office processes, the way you can ingest events, the ways that you need to encrypt data and disseminate it throughout the system, the way you need to actually invoke smart contracts and send in blockchain transactions. And so this Mortality Monitor application is fantastic because it really addresses all four of the layers that we see right here, from the data all the way up to the application layer. And I'll dig deeper into all the different pieces in Kaleido and how we make that work, and then you'll be able to see it in action as well. I'm going to stop sharing right now and just trim off a couple pieces of admin. First one, this is recorded, so you will receive this recording. We've done a ton of these over the last, I guess, 14, 15 months, and they're all curated on our YouTube page. So if you just search Kaleido blockchain on YouTube, you can see a beautiful curated list of all of the previous Tech Tuesdays that we've done, many of which have been with client partners, and many of which just dig deeper into specific pieces inside of Kaleido. A lot of our marketplace services, and a lot of the cool low-level protocol and node configurations that you're able to leverage inside of the platform. So these are available for you here. The other thing I would like to say is just please be as interactive as possible. We have two subject matter experts here in Brenda and Brendan and Sandy, and then myself and Sophia will be joining us from Kaleido. So we're happy to speak to any sort of commercial questions or any technical questions that you might have about the functionality of this system and this application. So don't be shy. Please use the chat, raise your hand, use the Q&A, whatever your cup of tea is. So that's it for me on the table setting. And I'm going to turn it over to Brendan first, and then we'll transition to Sandy, and then I'll take it back and we'll actually dig into the application. So I'm going to stop sharing and punt to Brendan.
Thank you, Nick. Go into presentation mode here. Okay, can you see my screen all right?
Yeah, it looks perfect.
All right, great. So folks, thank you very much for attending today. We're going to go over exactly what Nick has just described, but specifically we're going to talk about what Riskstream is and why and how we do what we do, who our members are, and some of the participant categories for the consortium. Our journey to Canopy 3.0, our network and our stack is called Canopy 3.0, and where we were circa 2017 and where we are today with Kaleido. Riskstream high-level product roadmap. We'll talk about all that's going on at Riskstream, and then we'll specifically get into Mortality Monitor and the demo for Mortality Monitor, and then we'll end with some Q&A. So late 2016, early 2017, a lot of the Institute's customers were talking about blockchain. The Institutes has been around for about 100 years. They're our parent organization. They were spun out of Wharton, and their whole mandate is to support and educate the insurance industry. We brought a lot of our members together, a lot of our customers together to talk about blockchain as the industry was talking about it. They wanted to do something about it. They wanted to explore it and figure out if it could be used for the insurance industry. And that essentially was the beginning of the Institute's RiskStream Collaborative. And we were created to support the industry in its research, exploration, and development of network-based technologies. We do this through a non-biased member-led forum that's inclusive of antitrust coverage. That antitrust coverage is exceptionally important for our members, allows them to come together and talk about shared pain points. And we specifically harness the benefits of network-based technologies such as blockchain, distributed ledgers, distributed databases through exploration, testing, and implementation. We like to focus on industry pain points across the entire insurance value chain, typically regarding efficiency, optimization, cost reduction, data consistency, customer satisfaction, and even revenue generation opportunities. And lastly, we try and embrace an open-minded, solution-agnostic outlook. We want to be member-driven and member-led. We are a 501c6 nonprofit, so we try and use a majority rules approach to arrive at the direction of our tech. What does RiskStream do? We investigate use case opportunities across the insurance value chain for carriers, reinsurers, producers within personal lines, commercial lines, life and annuities, and reinsurance. We launch and host member-led working groups to conduct insurance-focused use case design, development, and deployment. We create a shared understanding of and data standards for multi-stakeholder business process flows. So typically standards are a byproduct of bringing folks together to work or communicate across the network-based technology. And finally, we partner with solution providers to build proof of concepts, develop and mature products, and extend the value of the network and ecosystem for members in industry. So here's a quick look at our members and our participant categories. So you'll see there's numbers across the clock here, 1 through 6. The big bubble in the middle are our P&C members. We have over 30 members today, and that number is growing. The smaller bubble on number 2 is our L&A members. And even though this is a smaller bubble, it started a little bit behind the P&C group. So the traction there is not as strong, but the use case there is exceptionally strong. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. And then number 3, nonprofits. These are other associations, consortia, and academia. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a look at some of the folks we've worked with in the past. Number 4, these are the civics, regulators, Department of Insurance agencies, government agencies. The dark blue states are the states that we've been in conversation with. And in fact, this probably needs to be updated since we've reached out to just about every state as of last week. We have a summit. We've had 2 so far for called State Insurance Verification Reporting, and it's for the government agencies and our members to come together to talk about pain points associated with state reporting. So that'll be interesting to see that go into a lab format. And then number 5, collaborators. These are non-insurance companies, but companies that interact with the insurance industry on a regular basis. Think banks or energy companies. They've been knocking on our door since the very beginning. We don't have anything that is fully into production yet, but as soon as we do, we're going to be finding ways to get them involved. And number 6, these are providers, builders, connectors, or enablers. Entities that we've been working with for a long time include Accenture. They were in the house early 2017 on use case design and development. R3 with their quarter platform for proof of insurance and first notice of loss or private passenger auto. And then Kaleido, obviously, they are the newer entrant, and they came in for the Mortality Monitor POC and literally blew our minds. They were able to put the POC together in 3 weeks, which was just unprecedented. We are also working with Guidewire. They make a lot of the claims software for the insurance industry. And specifically, this is for first notice of loss. And Castle Bay is a Guidewire developer. They're helping us build an adapter that sits between our members' claim system and the Guidewire system, so that when a member or potential member wants to potentially connect, they can just go to the Guidewire marketplace, download an application, and they'll be on their way. And then lastly, TrustLayer. They are a startup. They recently raised about $6 million in seed funding, and they're the solution provider on the certificates of insurance use case. So any questions on that so far? And I'm not able to see the chat window. So Nick, you'll have to let me know if we have any there.
Yeah, no questions so far, but just to reiterate to folks that have a deep interest in this space, like there are no bad questions. So if something pops in your brain, throw it in the chat, throw it in the Q&A, and we can stop and address questions as they come in. But you're good to go, Brendan. Press forward.
Thank you, Nick. So the journey to Canopy 3.0, as mentioned, we started around 2017. At the time, we were working with Consensus and the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. We created 4 proof of concepts, and we wanted to prove to the industry and prove to ourselves that we could collaborate with basically competitors. We can bring competitors together to collaborate with one another, and we did do that. And we also started looking at the business plan for the consortium at that time. Late 2017, 2018, this is when we started calling the network and the stack for the network Canopy 1.0. We were using a private Ethereum network at this time. We were working with Deloitte for some of the use case design. This is when we officially set up the consortium, and we also created a POC for proof of insurance, private passenger auto with Nationwide. 2018, 2019, Canopy 2.0. This is when we started working with Corda for POI and FNOL. And at that time, we had Accenture, Deloitte, and Ernst & Young working with us for various aspects of what it was we were doing. Accenture for use case design, platform design, Deloitte for use case design, and Ernst & Young for things like the business network operations and IP policy. We also did a lot of cohort testing at this time for first notice of loss. That continues on to this day. I believe there are about 7 carriers who are testing first notice loss towards shadow production, which we hope to hit in July. We also ran a soak test. We ran 500,000 transactions through the Canopy network to emulate what it might look like in a real world setting to stress test it, and it did just fine. This is also when we got accepted into the Guidewire Accelerator program. And we also started looking into commercial lines use case and life and annuity and reinsurance use cases. Today, 2021, this is Canopy 3.0, and we are, because the Mortality Monitor was, POC was such a success, we are now moving everything we've done over to Kaleido, which is a big deal. And Kaleido is fantastic. Nick will talk more about it, but one of the things that was really intriguing, or actually there were several things, was that it's just a click button consortium setup. You can literally in minutes set up your consortium, identify who the players are, and then you can pick your ledger, right? So they have Corda, Quorum, Ethereum, Hyperledger. They have a number of different things you can choose from. Additionally, they were SOC 2 and ISO certified, which from a security standpoint, that's what our members need and require. Insurance information is needs to be highly secure, and it's very private. So we need that kind of, or that level of security. And it made it really easy to build proof of concepts. We needed a fail fast approach. We needed a mechanism or a platform in which to basically spin up and spin down concepts to see if they had legs, and Kaleido allows us to do that.
Hey Brendan, one request on the optics side. You have a little gray box hiding some of the nice slides on the right side of the screen.
Oh, I see it. How's that? Let me move this thing. Better?
Yeah, you fixed it. Okay, cool. I just want everyone to be able to see your beautiful slides. Okay, you're good to go. Carry on.
Apologize. Thanks. So Riskstream Labs process use cases and solutions. This is actually more on the high-level product roadmap. So you can see here for 2021, we are looking at use cases within personal lines, commercial lines, reinsurance, and life and annuities. Personal lines, we're looking at proof of insurance and first notice of loss, data sharing for private passenger auto, mentioned that earlier. Commercial lines, we're looking at certificates of insurance, surety, power of attorney, and workers' comp is another area. I think we were initially looking at data sources for underwriting, but I think that's pivoted a bit. Reinsurance, we've worked on a placement use case, and we're also currently working on a bordereau reporting use case. And then life and annuities, licensing and appointment, we have a summit coming up for that, April 22nd at 11 a.m. And we can follow up with a registration link for that. But what we're here to talk about today is Mortality Monitor and the success of that. Looking forward, we have some use cases in the batter's box, and I won't walk through all of these. But in the early days of the consortium, we had so many use case ideas that we didn't really know where to focus. And as the consortium started to form, our members came in and they started giving us some ideas of what to look at. So these are kind of next in line, but we also have beyond 2024 a massive funnel for each of these different product lines on potential use case opportunities. And I think at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Sandy to talk about Mortality Monitor.
Thank you, Brendan. So when we evaluated this use case, we began by looking at the pain points and the problems that the industry was facing. And we took the approach of just trying to ask that simple question of how can we make the claims process easier for the beneficiary and more efficient for the carrier. And it's important for the beneficiary to receive death benefits and payments as quickly as possible. Oftentimes, at the time of the death, generally that's the first experience that that individual has in dealing with the life insurance company. And what we found is that in order to have the paperwork in order, the process of filing the claims, if they don't have all of the paperwork in order and they don't have all of that information available to them, it becomes very cumbersome and a painful experience and frustrating experience for the beneficiary. And the challenge then is that they don't know where to start and they don't know what information they need at hand. And oftentimes they may have multiple policies. And so therefore they've got to go through this process multiple times for every product that they may have a policy for and for every carrier. And what becomes expensive then is that with each of those submissions, they need to associate a death certificate and purchase a death certificate and submit that with a claim and along with all of the paperwork. So they found that it could be very challenging for that beneficiary in order to make that submission. We also found that on the carrier side, they have similar challenges as well in the fact that the information isn't all readily available to the carrier. Oftentimes they have to assemble the information. They're receiving it from multiple sources. It may be incomplete, so they have to triangulate the information to determine if that individual is their policyholder in order to process that claim. So again, with the multiple handoffs between systems and people, potentially could increase the time, the cost, and the risk of processing these claims. At the end of the day, it's all about the data and the timeliness of that data, the completeness, consistency, and reliability of that data. So what I'd like to do is take you through on the next screen and walk you through the journey of the multiple stakeholders that are involved in this process and provide you with the full scope of the Mortality Monitor use case and the business flow, and which actually begins with the policyholder and the policyholder's death. Once the cause and the nature of death are then determined by the physician or the coroner, they will have to prepare the statement, validate that death, and that statement then is the official recording of that death throughout the downstream process. Eventually at step 2, the county and state collect that information and they register that information and it gets recorded with the vital records. And again, eventually reported on to the Social Security Department. Around that time, the funeral home is also notified. They may be preparing death certificates and that information may be passed on to the life insurance company. If it's not passed on at that time, it would be passed on later down in the process where the beneficiary would notify the carrier. Once the Social Security Department receives that statement or the information, they update a death master file. And the problem with that, it's the registry of the deaths. The carriers leverage that file to verify, validate. The problem is that that information may not get updated for 30, 60 days after the decedent's passing. So again, there's a gap in the time that that file is updated. And in addition, not all of the information is updated in that file. So that the carriers then have to start triangulating and pulling information from other sources. Further downstream, the beneficiary will attempt to obtain the death certificates, purchase those death certificates, and then complete the claims forms and submit those on to each carrier for which they have a policy or contract with. Once the insurer then is notified of the data, they'll assemble that information, verify it, and validate that the deceased individual is in fact their policyholder and did have an active policy or coverage at the time of their death. And this is where the MVP then comes into play, because provided that the carrier has all that information, the carrier can post the decedent profile to the Canopy network, and all of the carriers that would be on that network would be notified real time. And the carriers would be able to check against that decedent individual within their policy systems to determine if in fact that decedent is one of their policy holders. And if it is, they'll be able to subscribe to that profile by providing some additional information, and that would enable them to have full access to the decedent information as well as any additional supporting documents. So again, streamlining that process. It enables that the insurers would be able to proactively then contact their beneficiaries and service those claims more efficiently. And it eliminates the need for the carriers to have to collect that information, because what we found in researching and reviewing some of these pain points, the carriers were all going through that same process. So it's a duplication of efforts across every product line, across every carrier, of trying to assemble and validate this information. So again, this leads to expediting the payments to the beneficiary and providing a seamless experience for that beneficiary. So with that, I'd like to move on to the next slide. And again, this use case provides a common platform that allows us to access in a secure, transparent manner decedent information that, again, allows the carriers to identify potential deaths more quickly by refining that process, improving the beneficiary's experience, again, reducing their time, cost, and risk to the insurer. And our key objectives here with this use case is to reduce the beneficiary's burden, time, and expense of having to provide that death benefit or proving the death of an individual. It enables the instant notification, eliminating any delays in obtaining certified copies of deaths, reducing the turnaround time and cycle times for carriers. It also enables timely received death benefits by having that accurate, consistent information. Sharing it among the carriers enables them to proactively begin processing those claims and payments. And lastly, here, as far as the objective, optimizing resources through fewer touch points and rework efforts. The capabilities is that it provides that single source of truth, that decedent information is required to process a claim, and having valid, verifiable information in that single source enables the carriers to be able to more quickly process the claims. It also ensures a higher standard of data privacy and security. Again, as you see with the Kaleido product and platform, they provide the safe, secure, trusted data, and it's permission-based. So only those carriers who need to have access do have access to that information. Provides greater control of potential fraud. Again, by sharing real-time information, being able to alert any of the other carriers who may have that deceased individual on their policy records. If there's any potential for fraud activity, they can alert one another. So beyond just the processing of claims, but leveraging it to share other information, such as alerting of potential fraud. And then lastly, it includes economic incentives, so that as a carrier, if I am the first to receive notification, by gathering and sharing that information, we've incorporated economic incentives to share and post this information. So those are some of the high level capabilities, and I'd like to turn it over now to Nick, and he can certainly demonstrate how this use case and the build out of the proof of concept behaves within their application.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Brendan and Sandy. I'll say it again. We have some SMEs on the line here. We're taking you through, a proper bona fide enterprise consortia and application. So if you have any questions about, network building, about sort of the steps that go into, building one of these pain points, anything about the insurance industry, please give us your questions. We want this to be interactive as possible. So I have a bunch of cool stuff to show you. I'm going to start with some architectural pieces and some core building blocks that help make this happen. Then I'm going to show you the actual flow of the application. Then I'll take you into the application and we'll use it. And then I'll show you the pieces on the back end, all of this stuff, all of the runtimes in Kaleido that really make this thing work sort of very seamlessly end to end. So 3 core services I want to talk about before we dig into the architectural flow of the application. The first one is the question of how do I easily get transactions into the network? So any Ethereum developer knows that the classic route was to use, just one of the basic Web3 libraries out there, Web3 JavaScript, Ethereum, Python. But this requires a lot of expertise. This requires you to, be very comfortable with those low-level APIs, and you also bear the responsibility for transaction signing, proper encoding, and specifically the sequencing of transactions. That nonce management piece can get really, really tricky, and it can lead to sort of queued transactions and sort of a stagnant network where you're not getting your data into the chain and out of the chain. So what we built at Kaleido was a very, very elegant abstraction of the core Ethereum JSON RPC API, underpinned by Apache Kafka. We're not going to go ad nauseum into this because we've covered this on a lot of other webinars, but the main takeaway is you just teach Kaleido about your business logic, about your smart contract, and we're going to expose very basic RESTful APIs for every method that's in your smart contract. So over here at your server-side application tier, rather than embedding that with one of those thick, complicated SDKs, client libraries, you're using basic web development, just sending in async REST API calls. And Kaleido is going to do all the heavy lifting for you. We're going to buffer, we're going to queue those transactions, and we're going to drip feed them into the network at the optimal rate. We're going to package as many transactions as we can get into that block. And this is regardless of whatever, sort of configuration and consensus algorithm you're running, whether it's Geth, whether it's Quorum, whether it's, Besu, what have you. So this is the easy button that we have on Kaleido for getting transactions into the network. And this is exactly what Mortality Monitor uses. The other piece, which is sort of the outbound layer of our REST API gateway, is how do we get all of our dApps, updated in real time? Everyone needs to know about state changes that are occurring in the system, and you want to do it without having to do low-level WebSocket polling on those nodes and listening for events. So with our event stream functionality, you just get those events for free. You tell Kaleido, hey, I care about the state changes for these methods and these event signatures, and we'll give you those events to, an API gateway, any endpoint of your choosing. And now your dApps are updated in real time. You can have those events sent into your back office systems, and you can immediately react to them, and you can trigger downstream processes. So these two pieces, if you marry them together, these get you really far down the road when you're building an application. The other piece is, well, we have a lot of private sensitive data that's flowing through this system, specifically those death certificates that Sandy talked about. So how do we have a mechanism, how do we have some sort of transport rails that are going to allow us to stay in the same ecosystem, stay in the same platform, but have all of that enterprise end-to-end encryption and all of that security to securely and confidently transfer documents or any arbitrary private data. So what we have in Kaleido, without leaving the Kaleido platform and the ecosystem, is a service we call Document Store and Document Exchange. And this will integrate with your existing private data stores like a S3 bucket or a blob container. But what you can do is you can use, very standard enterprise-grade PKCS7, symmetric and asymmetric encryption using public key infrastructure. And you can encrypt a document and you can send it to a counterparty in the network. And you can ensure that only the intended recipient of that payload, of that death certificate, of that PDF file, of that legal contract, what have you, they're going to be the only ones that can decrypt it, make sense of it, and acknowledge their receipt of that document. So Document Store inside of the Mortality Monitor application is a really, really critical piece. And this is what we use to disseminate, proof of information, proving that you know the date of birth of a deceased individual, and to, request information and to exchange death certificates or other metadata attachments that go into what we call a decedent profile inside of this ecosystem. So let's take a look at how all three of these pieces right here, the REST gateway, document store, event streams, and then another public storage utility we have, IPFS nodes, we'll see how all those marry together. So I'm going to take you on a 27 slide PowerPoint journey here very quickly, and we'll be able to see how all of this works right here. So let me go into present mode. And okay. So hopefully everyone can see my screen here. So we're going to just give you the lay of the land of how this application actually functions. So attempting to transition slides here, bear with me as I find my way to another slide. Okay, trying one more time, apologies. Okay, here we go. All right, so what we have in Mortality Monitor is we have 4 instances of a DApp, a decentralized application. And the players inside of this use case were RiskStream as the founder of this initiative, and then Securian Nationwide and Prudential. So all 4 participants have their own DApp, they have their own dedicated Kaleido infrastructure and their own dedicated configurations, nodes, IPFS nodes, document stores, et cetera. So with this, you have, a great user interface, but you also have APIs, right? So as we think about integrating these core applications into your backend systems, a UI can be very, very important and very useful for, line of business folks. But, when we get to, sort of the low level integrations, APIs is how everyone's going to do it. And that's where those events and sort of those programmatic layers that Kaleido exposes become really important. So this is the stack for a business user or for a sysadmin right here, using the APIs or using the raw user interface. And then we have a lot of really important stuff on the Kaleido backend, all dedicated to each of these 4 individuals, partitioned, firewalled, no noisy neighbors, no leaking data, nothing is accessible, other than to the owning member. Everything is autonomous, unilaterally controlled. So everyone gets a Kaleido node, Quorum IBFT node. Again, that's its own dedicated infrastructure, and that's your blockchain right there, right? Those are all going to peer with each other. That's the consensus algorithm. That's where the transactions and the ledger is maintained. Every node has its own API gateway, which we just looked at. So sort of this easy button, this easy conduit or container or interface to simply submit transactions. Every node has the outbound layer of the REST API gateway, which is the event streams. So that's how all of the applications for free are going to get updated in real time about any state changes that are occurring in the system. For example, a new profile is created. Everyone has an IPFS node. This is a shared P2P cluster, and it's what we use in the Mortality Monitor application for what we'll call, in quotes, public data. Everything is private, obviously. We're in a permissioned, authenticated, private blockchain orchestration here. But there are certain pieces of data inside of the system, based on the application, based on the business requirements, that can be shared with everyone. Stuff like, date of death, right? Or maybe social security number, high level metadata that, needs to be publicly shared with everyone in the system. Then we have private data, right? Thinking about date of birth, for example, or that death certificate, or any attachment to a profile that has, monetary value or human hours value inside of the system. And that's what we keep private. And that's what we're going to use a separate transport rail to share that data right there. And that's done via Apache Kafka. So Apache Kafka sits under the covers for our REST API gateway, for our event streams, and it also sits under the covers as we need to exchange data from one document store to another document store. Gives us those confident messaging rails that we're going to get that guaranteed delivery of that data. So this is the infrastructure that we have inside of the system here. And this is what allows, for lack of a better description, all of the information to flow very seamlessly and to flow in an encrypted manner when it needs to do so. So let's look at 2 of the flows here. The first one is creating a new profile. And what we'll do as I show you the application, we'll create a new profile as RiskStream, and then we'll go ahead and add an attachment, and then we'll subscribe to that profile and purchase that attachment, acting as one of the other carriers here. So what happens when we create a new profile here? So RiskStream is going to upload, some new decedent information. So using the raw API or using the user interface, they're going to invoke a blockchain transaction. And the first thing they're going to do before they even write that transaction is they're going to upload that publicly available data to IPFS. So it's going to be date of death, it's going to be a social security number, it's going to be some other metadata, but it's also going to include a salt, right? We're going to create a salted hash of that data because we're ultimately going to write this as a key to the blockchain. And as everyone on the call knows, once you write something to the blockchain, that's indelible, that's there. So even though this data is publicly shareable within the system, we're going to go the extra step for security, and we're going to add a salt into it so that it truly is a one-way hash, that no one with brute force or some other reverse engineering mechanism is going to be able to derive those inputs. So we even protect the public data that we're writing into IPFS and ultimately onto the blockchain. Then we have certain private pieces of data right here, right? Specifically that date of birth and first name, last name, and a few other pieces inside of this system. That's going to document document exchange. So that's staying private from the get-go. So what we see here is we see, sort of a two-way tranche of data. We have the public data that we're putting into IPFS, and then we have certain private pieces of data that we're putting into Doc Exchange. Those get married together, though, to ultimately create what we call a content hash. So you have a key hash that's in IPFS, and then you have the full content hash that's getting written to Document Exchange, and it's staying private. So now we have two hashes, right? We have two strings or two arguments that we can write to the blockchain. And that's ultimately what's going to happen right there, right? After we retrieve those hashes from IPFS, from Doc Exchange, we're going to invoke a transaction. We're going to call our smart contract, and we're going to call the create new profile method, or whatever the heck that function is called inside of the smart contract. And we're going to upload those hashes, and every node's going to get this transaction, right? It's going to get mined, it's going to make its way into a block. Ethereum's fantastic, everything's deterministic, so everyone's going to execute it and get the exact same, world state. Then, based on those event streams that we've configured, every dApp cares about that event, a new profile being created. So they're all going to get this signature returned from the event stream, and they're going to be able to update their applications. So everyone in real time, regardless whether they're the creator of this new entry, they're going to know that something new happened in the system, and they can react to it, right? They can go do their own internal lookup, see if that's, one of their policyholders. They can prove that, they know that information, and they can ultimately retrieve more of the profile information. So they get that event, and then they update their applications right here. Okay, then they can go to IPFS. Remember, IPFS, everything's public. This is public inside of this private ecosystem. So forgive me if I sort of use public in an interchangeable sense. But anyway, everyone has that transaction. They have that event. They know about the two hashes. They're going to go make a call to their IPFS node. They know that key hash, and so they're going to go retrieve all of that publicly available data. Right? Again, public inside of this private ecosystem. And again, so now they know, all of that publicly available metadata. They know that date of death. They know the other strings. They know the uploader of the profile, etc. Now for the really interesting part. Okay, I realize that this is one of my policyholders, and I don't want to go through all the same hoops that maybe RiskStream or maybe Securian or Prudential already did, right? I just want to subscribe to that profile. I want to get all of those attachments, and specifically, I want that death certificate, right? So what happens when we subscribe to a profile? A very similar flow, but we're going to actually use Document Exchange a bit more heavily here. So let's look at Securian subscribing to a profile. First, using the API or using the user interface, they're going to invoke that smart contract, and they're going to say, hey, I want to subscribe to this. And the first thing you need to do is you need to prove to the uploader, the author of that profile, that you know some important pieces of information. And specifically, you need to prove that you know the date of birth inside of here. So what Securian is going to do in this flow is they're going to send a private encrypted payload proving that they know the date of birth to RiskStream, to the author of this profile. And RiskStream is going to get that. They're going to say, yep, that is the correct date of birth right here. You are going to be allowed to subscribe to this profile. And they're going to upload a transaction. They're going to invoke the smart contract, and they're going to say, hey, this guy's subscribed. We have a new subscriber to this profile. And what we do here too, as we're sort of getting private data, we weave in token economics. And this is where some of these applications can get really, really interesting, right? We can start getting sort of economic theory woven inside of here. So based on whatever the tokens are worth in your system, if you want to map those to fiat, if you want them to be utility tokens, you can start choosing different prices and different amounts to subscribe to a profile or to purchase attachments. As you're uploading an attachment, you'll see this here shortly, we can choose an arbitrary amount for this death certificate. So maybe it took me a lot of man hours to retrieve and verify this death certificate. And I had another death certificate that was kind of low-hanging fruit and didn't take a lot of effort. I can insert different allocations, different amounts for those pieces of private and arbitrary data right here. So all of the nodes are going to get updated. They're saying, hey, it looks like Securian has subscribed to this new profile right here. And again, just like we saw with creating the profile, as we're subscribing to a profile, all of the dApps get updated in real time, and they realize that there's a new, subscriber to this profile. And then the last piece is that private information needs to be exchanged, right? RiskStream needs to send to Securian inside of this flow some of that private data that's not available in IPFS. So they're going to send them back, the ACK of the date of birth. They're going to send them that first name, last name, and any other private metadata as well. And that's done via document exchange. So that was a one-way flow. That's not going to the rest of the network. That's simply going from this document exchange to this document exchange, underpinned with the Apache Kafka Rails that we have under the system. So that's the core flow, and we'll just go ahead and take a look at it inside of the application tier, and then I'll show you guys what's happening on the back end of Kaleido. Again, if there are any questions, or if you even just have a comment, please throw it into the chat or raise your hand. We're always happy to make this as interactive as possible. So let me stop the slideshow here, and then I'll take you into 2 instances of the application. Okay, looks good. Okay, so now into the application tier. So what we have here is I have 2 different instances of the application. I have a RiskStream application. Just think of this as insurance carrier number 1. And then I have an instance of the nationwide application. Just looking at sort of the flow, what we'll first notice is that if we're not subscribed to a profile right here, we can look at maybe this one right here, authored by Nationwide, no subscriptions. So I can click on this and we'll see that I see some of the high level metadata. I can see the author, I can see that timestamp, I can see the date of death, but I don't have the ability to purchase any attachments. I can't see fraud indicators. I can't see first name, last name, and specifically date of birth, and I can't get that death certificate, right? I need to subscribe to this profile in order to get it. I need to make that action right there. So rather than doing that, what we'll do is, acting as RiskStream, we'll just go ahead and create a new profile, and then we'll look at this through the lens of Nationwide, and we'll go ahead and subscribe to it, and then we'll purchase an attachment for whatever arbitrary amount that RiskStream deemed that death certificate was worth. So I'm going to start by adding a profile right here, and I have a little cheat sheet with some names. So we're gonna do this one right here, Charles Davis. This is all dummy data, obviously, so there's no real PII happening here. So I did 4s, 5s, and 6s, Charles Davis, and date of birth was 1171, and date of death was 1119. So let's see if I can remember all of that. So 444, 555, 666. And another cool thing, inside of this UI and this application tier is the system is smart enough to know that, this social security number is not complete, right? It doesn't have, the appropriate number of 9 digits, or it's missing a dash. So we'll see as we properly, fill in an SSN, this modal will actually allow us to move on to the next one. So if I add this other 6 right here and I give it 9 digits and the 2 dashes, we're good here. So we'll call this Charles Davis. I think that was the name. And date of birth was 1971, I think. Let me check, sorry. 1971, 11, and 19. Okay, so 1971, 01, 01, and then 2019, 01, 01, right there. So the system's happy right here. We saw that the modal shrunk. So I can go ahead and submit this. And this is a blockchain transaction, right? This is going to be our, create new entry method inside of the smart contract. And it's also going to emit an event so that, Nationwide, Securian, or Prudential, any of their applications are going to get this update in real time right here. So that transaction makes it into the network. As the author, of course, we see all of this information, and then the system, just more or less for optics and for security, we actually truncate and redact the vast majority of the SSN inside of the system. So to show you a little bit of code super quickly, just as we're talking about event streams and sort of these really important things, events are incredibly powerful constructs inside of Solidity, inside of smart contracts. So here we've created this event object right here, entry created, and we've added different arguments, different parameters into it. So we have our key hash, which is bytes 32, we have our author, and we have our content hash. And what's going to happen is if we go and look at this method, right, when I press that button, what I really did was I called this method inside of the smart contract, and it's going to emit that event. So it allows, again, Prudential, Securian, Nationwide, any other carriers inside of the system to get this notification, to get this, update or this world state change for free. So just a quick, primer on events and the value that they provide. So what I can do here now is I can just search for that social security number 66666, and we see that this was updated for free. And again, this is updated on the UI for free, but more importantly, where those events would really go is they would go into your existing back office processes. They'd go directly, into your claim systems. So let's go back to RiskStream, and now let's add an attachment. We see here as Nationwide that we can't really do much with this, right? Even if there was an attachment, I wouldn't have the ability to try to purchase it, right? I can't see, any of the available metadata, and I haven't subscribed to it. So subscribe is going to be the first core action that we need to take. Once I subscribe, then I'll be able to purchase an attachment. So let's go back to RiskStream, and let's go ahead and just add an attachment. I don't have, bona fide death certificates here. What I did instead was just create some text files. But the cool thing about Document Store is that, it'll take any piece of arbitrary data. It'll take a video, take a JPEG, it'll take a PDF, can be as long or as short as you want. So it can be as simple as a text file, or it can be as verbose as, a 50-page PDF. And here we see inside of sort of the token economics feature is that, me as the uploader of this death certificate, I can add an arbitrary amount. I can add, maybe 1 or maybe 5, maybe 10. So let's make this cost 10, and we'll go ahead and, grab that dummy little text file that I have here. Charles Davis, I believe, was the guy that we just did, and we can go and upload this. So I'll submit this, and this is also a blockchain transaction as well, right? The system updates in real time. Those event streams are really, really powerful. So now, acting as as Nationwide right here, what we can do is we can go back to this profile right here, and we can go ahead and do those two things. We can subscribe to it, which is going to cost some of our token balance. It's going to cost 1 token. And then we can purchase that attachment, which is going to cost 10 tokens, which is the amount that I just ascribed to it. So we can go ahead and click on this, click on subscriptions, and we can go ahead and subscribe. And what we'll notice is after we've subscribed, we're going to see all this private data. We're going to see all that private stuff that was living inside of Document Store. This is going to be encrypted and transported to us, to our private Document Store instance. And then this will be updated within our application or within our backend. So go ahead and click subscribe. And like we looked at in the flow, you need to prove that you know the date of birth right here. So this was 1971. 0101. So we can go and submit that. And this is going to be the ACK from RiskStream saying, yep, that is the right date of birth. You gave me the good stuff. We see that we decremented a token right here. And now we can go back to the details and we see that we have all of that private data. But maybe even more powerfully, what we see now is we have the ability to go ahead and purchase this attachment right here, this death certificate that took, a lot of effort and something that's going to really save us a lot of time inside of this ecosystem. So go ahead and click on the attachment right here, and we can just go ahead and purchase it right here. And as soon as we purchase it, again, this is a blockchain transaction. We'll see that this event is going to come triggered back to us, and we'll have the ability to, download and inspect this uninteresting .text file that I created. But of course, this needless goes without saying, this is real sensitive private data inside of the system, real death certificates, real legal contracts, real bills of lading, what have you, inside of the use case or inside of the industry vertical. So very easily, just go ahead and click download. I'll be able to go ahead and visualize that .text file. And what we can also do is we can go and look at the back end here. And I'll speed up just a bit because I want to leave time for a Q&A. But I do want to also draw your attention to kind of a lot of the magic that's happening in the back end on Kaleido. So the first thing I want to show is sort of this PKI infrastructure that lets us do the end-to-end encrypted messaging for one document store to another document store. So if I click on the membership for RiskStream, we see this thing called an on-chain profile. And what this really is this is a smart contract inside of your Kaleido environment, and it stores key value pairs. Specifically, it stores the public certificates that you need to use for that asymmetric encryption. So if in our example, Nationwide was sending something to RiskStream right here, they would take RiskStream's publicly available certificate, and they would use that as one of the core pieces in that asymmetric encryption right here. Pretty basic asymmetric encryption. But this is where those assets live. They live in the on-chain profile, which is sort of a sub or a nested object of your membership inside of Kaleido. The other pieces that you have, of course, you have your nodes. So those are incredibly important right here. So we can click on our nodes, we can click on our logs, we can see all of the core Geth logs, right? And then we can see the REST API gateway logs. And this is where we're sending in those transactions via Kafka, but this is also where those events are coming out, right? This is how the dApps are being updated in real time, right? So we can see the different events that are coming through the system, attachment purchased, for example, right? So even if we're not the player that's doing that action, every other application knows that, hey, Nationwide just purchased this attachment. They only purchase good stuff. Maybe we want to purchase it too. Or some logic along those lines right there. So these are incredibly powerful for getting data into the network and very easily getting data out of the network. And then the other piece that we want to look at, IPFS is pretty straightforward, so we'll skip that. But the other really important piece is our document exchange service. So this is the building block that allows us to store private data and then to send private data inside of the system. So we can go to the doc exchange for RiskStream. We can see the activity that just happened right there, the Charles Davis death certificate, the proof of the date of birth right there, the different acknowledgements that need to take place. We can see all of the transfers that have occurred. And then we can see sort of the different directories and the different folders that we have for all of this private data that's flowing through the system. So document store, incredibly powerful, incredibly important. And then the last cool thing I'd draw your attention to is just the ability to visualize these blockchain transactions. So everything that's coming in through the REST API gateway, it's going to get indexed. We know about the ABI, the binary interface of that smart contract. So we can expose a lot of interesting information right there. So we can go ahead and look at this latest transaction, the attachment purchased right there. And we can see, the key hash of that profile that I talked about, that publicly available data. And then we can see the attachment hash, the Charles Davis.txt right there that was purchased. You can see, who it was from, who it was sent to. You can see the gas consumed, anything that's, remotely interesting, sort of at the low level protocol layer. This is all exposed inside of the Block Explorer as well in Kaleido. So that's the whirlwind tour. I went a little longer than I meant to there, but hopefully that was a good encapsulation of how the system works, how the data flows, in the core pieces that really kind of add to the heartbeat of this system. So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll save 5 or 6 minutes for any questions that have come through. Surely there's at least one question from someone out there. And again, there are no bad questions, or even a comment might be useful. I wonder. Oh, okay. We'll leave it with you then, Brendan. I was going to see if Sophia had a comment. Sophia is the COO of Kaleido, so she's been very instrumental in the relationship with RiskStream and been hand-holding this project, sort of from its inception to the current state that it's at. So, Sophia, do you want to just share 30 seconds of learnings about this journey that we went on?
Yeah, well, I was wondering maybe we could start in the other direction, which is if Brendan and Sandy could talk a little bit about what's next and opportunities for the broader industry and the carriers, the LNA carriers in the industry.
Unmute, Brendan.
You're good, Sandy.
Want me to go? So yes, we are planning to continue to look for opportunities to expand the network. We will be hosting a carrier summit coming up, most likely next month. Again, to showcase this great work, the great effort and the success, and to continue to build upon the success of the proof of concept is to engage a broader market of carriers and also look at expanding that ecosystem. As you saw from the journey map of all the stakeholders, MVP is starting in a focused area, bringing in the carriers and sharing that data. But our long-term vision is to expand that ecosystem and bring other stakeholders on the network so that others would have the opportunity to take advantage of the information and really get down to that single truth. Brendan, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I flashed my email address up there a second ago, picha@theinstitutes.org. But we're just looking for, engagement from carriers. And if you guys or anybody on the phone is a representative of a life carrier, feel free to reach out. We can give you a separate overview, answer any questions you have. But yeah, we're just looking to go into production hardening at this point and grow the network.
So I'm going to add a few URLs a few emails into the chat as well for anyone that wants to get in touch with Kaleido. So adding one for technical or commercial questions, support@kaleido.io. If you have more of a strictly commercial question, you can do sales@kaleido.io. If you want to dig deeper into the tech stack or need sort of a bespoke demo, I'm going to include my email as well. Happy to talk through sort of any projects that you have going, regardless of the phase that you're in. We've done everything from the early stages to folks like Riskstream here that have the technical acumen and the appetite to move really quickly and get something into that pilot POC phase. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there was one question to the panelists that asked about the full builds for the app. So as Nick was saying, we provide over 40 plug-and-play assembling blocks. So it really, as Brendan said, it took 3 weeks to just assemble those together. And then the UI is just really the veneer on top of that. That Riskstream had done years of work with the working group to decide on the process flows, establish the business benefit ROI. They have done a lot of really interesting work just on feasibility and the data analysis. So the business case is made as well. All of that and bringing the consortium together, the business, legal, and governance. This is something that Riskstream Collaborative really excels at, and then Kaleido provides the technology. I do see that, well, first, Brendan, maybe you could put your email address into the chat where it's panelists and attendees. And then David has a question. He said, do you envision the function of death validation as being performed by a third party in the future that is specialized in this role? Given the token economics, a third party could profit from supplying data to the network of carriers. Great question.
Absolutely. And when we looked at the journey map of the various stakeholders, that's where we want to expand and extend downstream and bring on some of those other stakeholders. So when the data is, when the death is verified and certified, whether it's the physicians, the coroner, the funeral homes, the vital registers of within each state or county, all of those stakeholders would definitely want to bring on board on the network. So that is our future vision.
Yeah, and I think to the token economics part, Kaleido works across all industries. So in some other industries, we have seen people using token economics to help motivate the right behaviors in the network in terms of people who provide the data get a benefit for that. If you subscribe to it, you have to pay for it. You challenge it and provide updated data, you get a benefit for it. So the token economics can help align the incentives and motivation so everyone is working together to solve common shared data problems in the industry. So that's a very, I think, exciting development as you see more of these industry ecosystems forming, because in the past, there might have been an incentive for someone to just be the fast follower and to not actually gather the data, but to benefit from someone else gathering the data. And that maybe was more of the industry heavyweights who invested a lot more. And then you had newcomers who maybe could provide a great user experience, but they weren't providing some of that infrastructure and rails in terms of collecting the data. So I do think this helps provide a more equitable playing field and a lot, obviously, with the transparency and trust around the immutability of what's happening as well. I think we're exactly at the top of the hour. I don't see any other questions that have come in. So do want to huge thank you to Brendan and Sandy for joining us, and Nick for hosting on the Kaleido side and doing the technical walkthrough. We will have a recording of this, which we'll be sharing later in the week. So hopefully everyone will get to enjoy that, and we will make that available to folks who weren't able to make this time slot as well. We do have a lot of international clients in other time zones. So this would be, for example, in Japan would be middle of the night. So thanks again for joining us. Nick, any parting comments?
No, just I echo that. Huge thanks to Sandy and Brendan, and anyone, don't hesitate to reach out to RiskStream or to Kaleido. Love to learn more about any initiatives that you guys have. And I will say that the final comment is we have some pretty cool Tech Tuesdays coming down the pike, so stay tuned for more information on that, and really hope you can join us on some future sessions.
Yeah, final comment. Brendan and Sandy covered the Mortality Monitor. AWS is doing a thought leadership panel on blockchain consortia, and Pat Schmidt from the RiskStream Collaborative, as well as Securian Financial, will be speaking about that use case in the context of broader consortia governance. How do you put together consortia? And Pat will talk about other use cases as well. That will be on April 29th, so stay tuned. With this video, we'll provide some information on that thought leadership panel as well.
Super. All right. Thanks, everyone. And a final thanks to Sandy and Brendan. And like Sophia said, this is recorded. We'll disseminate this shortly as soon as it's doctored up. And huge thanks. Hope everyone stays safe, stays healthy, and hope to see you again soon at another Tech Tuesday.